Hi guys, MrRoflWaffles here. You might think, hey Milo, you're looking pretty tired right now. I just woke up. I literally just woke up at the exact minute that Treyarch uploaded a new Vanguard Zombies teaser trailer. They just keep doing this to me, dude. Or maybe I just have those sorts of spidey senses that means that I wake up for these things. Either way, we're going to take a watch now. We're going to see what it looks like. We're going to break it down a little bit. Without further ado, here it is. So you got the zombie hand up, then it goes down. You got this dude, and that's a much closer shot of him. Zombie crouching on a pile of bodies or whatever. And then boom, 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 Vanguard Zombies. Crazy, crazy quick. Crazy quick. So we're going to slow it down because there's just a lot more to talk about here that we're not going to be able to talk about if we are going lightning speed. And we'll do that now. So what I've got is I've got prepared here a slower version of this. Okay? So we can really get a good look at it. So first things first, if we go back to this first mark, this is actually the end of it, right? This is the end of it. I want to talk about the guy in the back. So the guy in the back is gonna be, most likely, an old god in the Dark Ether lore. So in the old Ether lore, right, we had Keepers, we had Apothicons. They were actually both sort of reflections of one and the same original species that then kind of fractured, went its own two different ways. One was more aligned with the dark, one was more aligned with the light, yin and yang, that kind of thing, right? That was the idea, but they came from the same root in the ether at the time, in the ether story. And so what's interesting about a dude like this is he seems to not be one of those Keepers or one of those Apothicons. He seems to be a different breed of Dark Ether entity who still exists in the zombies universe, of course, but isn't necessarily connected in the same way that those two really inherently were. And personally, I think this is actually a really good thing. I mean, look, you can see also in some of these shots, there are runes in the background, right? You've got runes in the background of this shot. You've got much clearer runes in the background of this shot once the hand kind of gets out of the way. There you go. This central rune is going to be a real center point of Vanguard Zombies, or at least of the first map, because I think this is basically the rune that is going to represent that initial boss, that old god, that cortex, or whatever the name of the god is, that thing that we're going to be looking at there. I reckon he's represented by this or tied to it very inherently. But like I said, what's interesting is none of these other runes actually look like Keeper or Apothicon. I mean, down here, this looks more like Japanese than it does anything else to me. Looking in the top right, that looks like a new kind of rune. Looking at the kind of symbol in the bottom of this thing here, looks like a new kind of rune. None of that at all looks like Keeper or Apothicon. Apothicon and Keeper are very distinct languages. They work in a very specific way, and they just don't align with what we're seeing here. So these are a new kind of runes. Now, with that said, we have seen this rune in Craft's journal. Craft is a relatively new character in the zombie story, and he basically illustrated this rune for us from a dig that he did during the Second World War in Egypt. That's where he found this particular one, but he did also find another rune. We'll come back to that in a second here. First of all, just one more detail about this is that his drawing of the rune was actually flipped. It was inverted horizontally. Now, I don't know if that's because he was taking some kind of relief of it and that's what would have done the horizontal flipping, or if what we're seeing here is actually like behind where the rune is properly being displayed or something. Like if it's hanging in the air in some way, shape or form, it might be the German guy that's kind of creating this massive portal to bring this boss in or whatever is kind of standing there doing that, and then there's all like zombies and all sorts behind him. That might be the perspective of the shot here. But anyway, moving on. There's this other rune, right? And the other one looks pretty different in my opinion. This is what that other rune looks like. And as you can see, it's a very, very different style. And the writing there, just in case you can't see it, says another rune unearthed, this time in Mexico. And it's very similar to the one that they found in Egypt, which was the one I just showed you. Now, to me, this kind of looks like a gateway or a door of some kind. That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting. But if this is also related to another old god, it might be that what we're seeing with the Cortex, or Core, whatever he's going to be called, Core Blimey, he's a crazy awesome looking boss, he could be the kind of manifestation of evil potentially, and there could be one associated with this from Mexico that would be more associated with good. Like maybe they're two sides of the coin, just like we saw with the Keepers and the Apothicons. If that's the case, we as the player may end up working with whatever this particular rune is associated with, whatever god that is. However, I do think it's more likely that that rune is going to refer to just some kind of gateway or door, and that brings us on to talking about the kind of strange device that the German is holding in this trailer. So he drops his cape, he's looking all happy, but he has this very distinct item on his back. We see him holding it in the teaser art, we see him holding it in the teaser yesterday as well, and it seems to be made up of 2 triangular prisms with a kind of central energy charge in the middle, and I kind of wonder if this is basically going to be the golden rod or the summoning key of this new universe. I mentioned this a little bit in my video yesterday. It just gives me the vibe of being one of those essential artifacts that wields great power or holds great power or can kind of trap souls or unlock other devices or just in some way, like it's a key of some form. And that ties into this graphic, right? Where it's like, well, is it unlocking this kind of door? Is this not just a door, but like a gateway? And is that what we're seeing, this big portal thing in the background here? I'd also think it's very cool in this shot how you've got these floodlights and spotlights on this one particular point, and he's holding his arms up like this, right? And that gives me the vibe that he has basically just initiated this summon, or he's done this thing on maybe a pile of bodies, and they have essentially transformed into zombies right in front of him, and he's like, aha, my life's work, my creation is so amazing. And I just really do like the vibe. And also the streetlight in the back right there, it really kind of gives me a World War II Zombies vibe, which is quite funny. Just there's something about that aesthetic that just reminds me of it. You also might have noticed in this shot that the zombies don't just have 3 eyes, right? Yesterday we thought they just had 3 eyes and that was that. No, it's actually maybe cooler than that. The zombies have their 2 regular eyes, and they are red, by the way. We'll talk about that in a sec. But they also have a rune on their forehead. It's not just any old eye, it's a rune carved into their forehead and glowing from the inside. And in previous years gone by, right, in zombies lore, red eyes indicated something pretty specific, right? We kind of had the vibe that dark forces were in control, and that manifested in various ways. Like, I think Monty ended up being a pretty dark force. I think that the Shadow Man ended up being a pretty dark force. Just generally, the devil himself, Satan, all of that sort of stuff kind of did creep its way in its own little ways in various maps. And so seeing it again here, you could think, okay, well, are we going back to that, or is this just a new force entirely? And I would argue it is the new force entirely, and we're probably going to have red eyes through all of this game, and the red will simply represent and indicate that it's associated with the dark ether. And you may then be asking, well, why aren't the eyes red in that same way in the Cold War Zombie storyline? Like, what's good there? What's going on with that? And I'd make the argument that this game, even though it's in the dark ether storyline, is actually taking place in a point of zombies that has never been explored before, because this is taking place in the dark ether of a world previously unconnected to the ether story. And so in that way, it's almost like it isn't actually the dark ether, it's actually just hell. Like, it genuinely is a separate window of time and space and the world, the universe, that has never actually had that link to the dark ether stuff, because it was at tag that these worlds meshed, right? It was at tag that happened. And this is pre-tag, but it is still the dark ether. So what that almost suggests is that in the merging at tag, we kind of, in a weird way, like retrofitted the dark ether to a universe, and this is what that looks like. It's the dark ether before the dark ether existed in this timeline. And I don't know about you, but I think that's cool as hell, and I think that means that Treyarch have infinite room to make the rules whatever they want to do. I think that they can completely ignore the Keepers and Apothicons because they don't need any of that for it to make sense in this universe. They just need it to be evil in some way, obviously. And it's like, I guess the way I would describe it is the dark ether itself, but reflected in a different way. Like, reflected and shown in a different way. It's an analogy for the dark ether almost. You could think of it that way. Like, this is metaphorical in some sense for the dark ether that we're more familiar with in Cold War Zombies, etc. Obviously, it's not just a metaphor. It is just a real thing, but I'm trying to get across that it's a representation of what things would have been like, but if you sort of remove that tag presence that brings us into what we end up with in the future. Now, also, the dark ether itself has been changed in a really dramatic way by the come up of Zykov. As he turns into the Forsaken, there's a whole lot of stuff going on there where these old gods that we're seeing on screen are being consumed. And if that causes the dark ether to go from this reddish hue to his more purpley color, that could be really damn cool. I mean, the purpley kind of glow does end up feeling very Zykov. I mean, he's literally built out of the stuff. And so if that's his association, but prior to him, the dark ether was a red, hellish landscape, then that would kind of explain a lot of the themes and imagery that we're seeing on screen right now, right? Like that would just tie in super well. Also for this shot here, I just want to go back to the fact that, like I said before, I think that this is a pile of bodies being reanimated, potentially, because look at the way they move here, like especially these ones on the floor. They really look like they're just sort of like finding life and writhing in place, starting to like stand up, similar to some of the other ones here. Like look on the one on the left, he's sort of starting to stand up here. So, and then of course we've got the logo, and I think it looks absolutely beautiful. And I love how the blood like drains through the Vanguard there and then goes into the zombies text. I think that looks so cool. And also once again, you've got the symbol of this old god, this old one in the O, which is kind of, in my opinion, going to represent that that's going to be the main thing that we're focused on. That's the main bad guy. That's the main enemy. And whatever the other rune is probably some kind of supporting feature, or like we said, some other old god that may even help us on our task if it's more aligned with the positive rather than the negative, the light rather than the dark. So I'm going to wrap this up here. Let me know what you think of all this. I'll, of course, be posting the full trailer tomorrow on my channel, reacting to the whole thing, so you can look forward to that. In the meantime, though, just to sort of give you a quick update on me, I look this tired because I'm working on a really, really big video for you guys, and it's been a grind, I'm not going to lie, but it's nearly there, and it's going to be so good when it's released. It's just going to be so good. If you're a fan of zombies storylines, then you're going to like it. I'll see you soon, guys. Bye for now.